Whenever I remember that night, I feel a chill. It was one of those snowstorms that covers everything quickly, making everything around unrecognizable. I was driving on a deserted road, almost no visibility left, when I realized I had no choice. The car was skidding, and I knew the wisest thing would be to find some kind of shelter until the storm passed. That's when I spotted a small refuge by the side of the road, an old and isolated house. With the wind cutting across my face and the cold threatening to freeze my body, I practically ran to it. The door was ajar, as if it were waiting for me. Barely had I closed the door behind me when an odd silence enveloped me. The kind of silence you feel in your skin, as if the very air is charged with something you can't identify. The snow outside was making a peculiar sound, but inside, everything was still. I was just breathing heavily, trying to warm up, when I started to hear something. Whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind, but it was more like a soft, distant voice. The feeling that I wasn't alone there was instant. It wasn't just the sound. It was like someone was watching. My body tensed. I knew I needed to investigate, but at the same time, something told me to run. I decided to follow the source of the sound, which seemed to come from the walls. The house was in poor condition, and I could smell the mold in the air, mixed with the freshness of the snow piling up at the door. As I walked, the whispers grew louder, and it was as if they echoed. The discomfort only increased. When I reached the room where the sound seemed strongest, I saw something strange, a hooded figure standing in the corner, almost invisible in the dark room. I don't know what made me approach, maybe the instinct to understand what was happening. When I took a step forward, it quickly turned. But before I could react, the figure vanished. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind trying to process what had just happened. I tried to find an explanation. I went to the corner where the figure had been and saw tracks. They weren't shoe marks or any common type of footwear. They were ice footprints, stretching across the cold wooden floor as if something had walked there. But the strangest part was that, when I looked at the footprints, I couldn't tell if they were mine or the figure's. A part of me wanted to leave immediately, but something kept me in place, a morbid curiosity that I couldn't shake. I tried to focus on the trail of footprints, but with every step I took, the marks seemed to multiply. Some seemed to come directly from the wall, as if the figure had materialized there, and others went in different directions, disappearing in the middle of the room. I wondered if I was delirious, or if all of this was really happening. The storm outside seemed stronger, the wind howling loudly, but inside the house, the silence was almost complete, interrupted only by my own footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. I wiped my forehead, trying to clear my mind, but the feeling of being watched was inescapable. I decided to leave the house, feeling the pressure intensifying with each passing second in that place. When I opened the door, the gust of snow hit me hard. I looked outside and couldn't believe what I saw. The footprints that had appeared inside the house continued outside, as if someone had walked out with me. Or maybe was following me. I didn't know what to think anymore. My steps seemed confused and intertwined with the footprints, as if the environment had shifted somehow. At one point, I had the feeling the trail was leading me somewhere specific, but where would it take me? The footprints continued to guide me, and I didn't know whether I should follow or run far from there. The storm intensified, making it hard to see more than a few meters ahead. With each step I took on the footprints, the ground seemed to give way a little, creating muffled sounds that echoed as if the snow was absorbing me. My eyes were fixed on the path ahead, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't let me go. It was as if someone was just behind me, waiting for the right moment to appear. Suddenly, as I looked to the side, I noticed something strange. A shadow was moving at the edge of my vision, in the distance. It was hard to believe, but it was as if a hooded figure was approaching me through the shadows, the snow not covering it as it should. I quickly turned to face it, but when I turned my body, there was nothing there. Just the emptiness and the white snow stretching as far as my eyes could see. The silence was deep, but the weight of the presence, even though invisible, made me want to run. The storm was blinding me, and suddenly everything mixed, the wind, the footprints, the emptiness. I didn't know if what I was seeing was real or the product of my mind, but the panic had already taken over. I felt my hands trembling as I tried to decide what to do. The sense of disconnection from reality was growing with each passing second, as if time and space around me no longer made sense. The sound of the wind cutting through the night seemed louder, stronger, as if it were trying to swallow me, and yet, I still saw those footprints in the snow, now clearer, deeper, as if they were leading me somewhere. But where? And why was I following? I decided to continue, not understanding why, as if an invisible force was pulling me forward. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, the sensation of being followed growing unbearable. When I looked back again, something made me stop. The trail of footprints was there, but now there were more marks that weren't mine. They were aligned with mine but more recent, deeper, as if someone had followed the same path just after me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. The footprints seemed to be watching me, as if they knew exactly where I was going. The air was heavy, freezing, and the footprints in front of me seemed to invite me to go deeper into the darkness. I knew something was wrong, but a part of me, the more rational part, tried to convince me that I should just leave, go back to the car, and escape that nightmare. But I couldn't move. The footprints in front of me were becoming clearer and more regular, as if they were being made by someone who knew exactly where they were going. And somehow, that made me keep going. With every step, the feeling that I was not alone only grew stronger. I didn't want to look back, but something urged me to know what was following me. I turned, and the trail of footprints I had left was no longer there. They were there, but they weren't mine. They seemed more recent, more hurried. My heart raced. Something or someone was behind me. I quickened my pace, but as I did, I realized that the snow ahead of me seemed to move, as if the ground were closing in around me. The wind howled more intensely, as if it were screaming, and I finally understood. I was trapped here, somewhere between reality and the unknown. I stopped running, breathing heavily, trying to understand what was happening. Panic was overtaking me. I looked around, but the snow seemed endless, as if the world had turned into a vast white stretch with no end. There was no sign of life, no footprints, nothing but the sound of the storm, and still, I felt a presence, as if I were being watched. Forcing my mind to focus, I realized that the best thing to do was to return to the refuge. The problem was, when I looked back at the small cabin, it was farther away than I remembered. The sensation that everything around me was changing, distorting, was unsettling. Was I walking in circles? Was the blizzard deceiving me, creating an illusion of the path? But when I looked down, the footprints were back. My own footprints, perfectly visible in the snow. I hadn't walked that far, but how could those footprints be there if I hadn't even retraced the entire path? That's when the hooded figure appeared again, at the edge of my vision. I couldn't see it clearly, but the outlines were clear enough. The same figure I had seen in the cabin, a fleeting shadow, as if it had been watching me all along. It was no longer in the cabin. It was here, in front of me, at the edges of the storm. Panic spread through me like wildfire. My body froze, my legs didn't respond, but my mind was racing. I knew I couldn't stay there. I knew the wisest thing was to keep walking, to leave, to escape that presence. The figure, hooded and motionless, didn't move, but I felt the pressure of its eyes, even though I couldn't see it clearly. As if it were analyzing me, waiting for me to make the next move. That was enough for me to decide. I didn't know where I was going, but the mere fact of getting away from that shadow seemed the only reasonable course of action. I took a deep breath, took a step, then another. I didn't look back, because I knew that if I did, something worse would be waiting for me. So I kept going, the sound of snow crunching under my feet, the only thing I could hear besides the frantic beating of my heart. That's when I saw my car. It was parked where I had left it, as if nothing had happened. Relief hit me hard, but the fear didn't let me rest. I got in the car, slammed the door, and quickly started the engine. The storm was stronger than ever, and I could barely see anything beyond the snow and fog in front of me. But I knew I had to leave. Even though it was risky, I wasn't staying. The feeling of being watched still haunted me, but I couldn't wait any longer. I drove cautiously, trying to keep calm despite the terror still consuming me. I didn't know if the figure was still out there, but the feeling that something was following me didn't fade. The road seemed endless, and the blizzard worsened by the minute. I was completely alone, yet at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was with me, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. The fear that something was there, in the shadows of the storm, was unbearable. I passed a few familiar spots on the road, but upon looking closer, I realized everything seemed like a blur. I didn't know if I was going in circles, or if my mind was playing tricks on me. Everything was distorted, as if the storm was trying to swallow me, confuse me, but I didn't give up. Finally, after hours with almost no fuel, I managed to reach the nearest town and check into a hotel, escaping that nightmare. Traveling alone had never been a problem for me. In fact, I even liked it. I always thought that driving on deserted roads in winter had a peaceful feel to it. The silence of the snow covering everything, the headlights cutting through the darkness, just me and the road. But that night, something felt off. I can't explain it well. It was as if the silence was too heavy, like something was hidden beneath it. I hadn't seen a single car in the last few miles, and the only thing that accompanied me was the rhythmic sound of the tires cutting through the snow. Until I heard my name. It was quiet, almost imperceptible, like a whisper mixed with the wind. My eyes scanned the surroundings automatically, but there was nothing but the vast white expanse and the twisted trees at the edge of the road. I convinced myself it was just my mind playing tricks, but as I kept driving, the sound didn't stop. My name repeated softly, as if someone were very close, but at the same time coming from nowhere. I turned on the radio to try to drown out the discomfort, but the signal was poor. Static. The whisper continued. I gripped the steering wheel harder, trying to focus only on the road, but the voice seemed closer. It wasn't the wind. I was sure of that now. The way my name was spoken, slow, almost affectionate, sent a chill down my spine. I glanced quickly in the rearview mirror, hoping to see nothing, but for a second, just a second, I swore I saw a shadow moving in the distance, on top of a snow-covered hill. I slammed on the brakes without thinking. The road was completely deserted, and I knew I shouldn't stop in the middle of nowhere, but something about the way the silhouette was positioned unsettled me. It seemed to be watching me. I waited a few seconds, trying to discern any details in the darkness, but when I blinked, the figure was gone. My stomach churned. I knew what I had seen. It wasn't a tree, nor an animal. Someone had been there. I swallowed hard, and tried to convince myself that I was just tired. Hours driving on that empty road, the snow falling non-stop, the headlights reflecting on the endless white, all of that could be playing tricks on my mind. But the whispers kept coming. Now, it wasn't just my name. It was broken words, distant, like someone was trying to say something, but the wind muffled the syllables. I sped up. I didn't want to look in the rearview mirror anymore, but the temptation was unbearable. My heart was pounding in my chest when I gave in and looked again. Nothing. Just the empty road, the snow-laden trees, and the darkness swallowing everything behind me. But then a shadow crossed the road quickly, right in front of the headlights. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidded, and I felt my stomach churn when I almost veered off the road. When I stopped completely, my chest was heaving uncontrollably. I wasn't alone on that road. My first reaction was to try to rationalize. Maybe it was an animal. A deer, a wolf, even a lost dog. With the snowstorm and poor visibility, it was easy to get scared by anything that crossed my line of sight. But when I looked again, there were no footprints in the snow. Nothing. Just the road covered in white, as if nothing had passed through there. I needed to get out of there. I gripped the steering wheel, took a deep breath, and shifted into gear. But before I could accelerate, I heard it again. The whisper. This time it sounded closer. My name, almost inside the car. Coldness ran down my spine. I looked in the rearview mirror, and my blood ran cold. Right on the edge of the road, in the same spot where the shadow had crossed, there was something standing. I couldn't see the face, but I felt like it was staring directly at me. I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. The fatigue, the snow, the isolation, all of it could be making me paranoid. I took a deep breath and blinked a few times, trying to clear my vision. When I looked again in the rearview mirror, the thing was gone. That should have relieved me, but it only made the feeling that something was wrong worse. If it had been an animal, it would have left tracks in the snow. If it had been a person, why didn't they approach? I didn't know what to think. I just knew I had to get out of there. I adjusted my grip on the wheel and started driving, trying not to look around anymore. But as I moved down the road, the whispers returned, now louder, as if they were coming from inside the car. The car slid a few meters before stopping abruptly, and my body was thrown forward with the impact. My hands were still tight on the steering wheel, the knuckles white from how hard I was gripping it. My heart was racing. I was sure of what I saw. Something had passed in front of the car. The first thing that came to my mind was that it could be an animal, maybe a deer or even a lone wolf. But something was wrong. The shape was tall, too thin to be an ordinary animal, and the way it moved, it was strange. Before I could react, the same shadow crossed the road again, this time even closer, right in the area illuminated by the headlights. I only saw it for a second, but I was certain it wasn't an animal. My chest tightened immediately. My instincts screamed for me to floor the accelerator and get out of there, but my body was frozen, waiting for it to appear again. My mind was screaming for me to step on the gas, but my hands were trembling on the wheel. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it really was an animal. Maybe the snowstorm was creating strange shadows, maybe I was too tired, and my brain was playing tricks. But then I heard it again. That whisper. My name, clear as day, coming from somewhere on the road. But now it wasn't a distant sound. It was as if it were right beside the car. My whole body froze. I forced myself to look in the rearview mirror, expecting to see something, but there was only the darkness of the snow-covered road. The engine was still running, and in that moment, I didn't want to know anything else. I shifted into gear and accelerated. The wheels slid for a second before gaining traction, and I kept going forward without looking back. The whisper seemed to follow the car, but I kept my eyes on the road. I drove on until I spotted a small rest area a few miles ahead. Only when I stopped there, beneath the light of a lone street lamp, did I realize I had been gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my hands were numb. I can't explain what happened that night. When I told this story to a few people, I heard everything, from extreme fatigue, hallucination, to echoes of the wind and the snow. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And to this day, whenever I drive alone on isolated roads in the winter, I find myself listening closely to the sounds around me, hoping I never hear that whisper again. I went in search of a refuge, a calm place for our honeymoon, far from everything and everyone. My husband and I wanted a secluded spot where we could be at peace, away from the pressures of the city. We found a cabin in a remote area, in the middle of a snow-covered forest. When we arrived, everything seemed perfect. The cabin was a little old, but charming, and the view was breathtaking. It was exactly what we imagined, a place to relax and enjoy. However, little did we know what awaited us. On the first night, something started to bother me. I was lying down, almost falling asleep, when I felt a strange sensation. Something I couldn't explain clearly, but I felt it. I turned to look out the window, and in the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow. I couldn't see clearly, but it was the figure of a man, standing outside, looking in. My heart raced. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination or the moonlight playing with the shadows, but the feeling of being watched was too strong to ignore. That night, I couldn't sleep properly, and that was just the beginning. The next night, the dreams began. They weren't ordinary dreams. I dreamt of the man, always the same scene. He was outside, standing, watching through the window, his eyes fixed on me. It was as if he knew exactly what I was doing, as if he was waiting for the right moment to approach. The feeling was unsettling, but the worst part was when I woke up in the middle of the night and saw, through the window, the same figure, exactly like I had seen in my dreams. Fear paralyzed me. I couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. The figure was there, but it was closer. It was as if he was watching me even more intensely. When I mentioned it to my husband, he laughed, saying I was just imagining things. But the next night, he saw it too. He woke me up, terrified, and told me he had seen the same man, standing in the same position at the edge of the forest. He was staring at our window, as if he knew we would see him again. From that moment on, things started to get worse. We couldn't leave the place without feeling that something was watching us, and worse, the figure seemed to always be ahead of us, as if it was leading us back to the cabin, with no way to escape. I know we should have been concerned after seeing that figure outside, but honestly, we were so focused on enjoying our honeymoon that we tried to brush it off. We looked at each other, laughed about it, and decided that if it was something strange, maybe it was just a product of our imagination. After all, the place had been empty for years, the cabin was well isolated, and nothing seemed to suggest anyone else was there. So, as much as I still felt a chill down my spine, we tried to move on. After all, we really wanted to enjoy the tranquility of the place, the moment alone with no worries. What happened next was hard to explain. A few hours later, already at night, we were sitting on the couch, trying to relax and forget what we had seen. I was a little tired, so I decided to lie down for a bit, and my husband stayed there, messing with his phone. Suddenly, we heard a sound. It wasn't a natural sound from the house, like the creaking of the beams or the wind hitting the walls. It was a clearer sound, like someone knocking on the door. My husband froze. He looked at me, and for a moment, I expected him to laugh about it, like he always would in any other situation. But he didn't laugh. He got up and went to the door, but there was no one outside. Just silence, as if nothing had happened. I felt relieved when he came back and said no one was there, but at the same time, something was bothering me. The sound of the knock kept echoing in my mind, and the atmosphere felt different, more tense. The feeling of being watched returned strongly. It wasn't just the idea from the window, but something deeper, as if the entire place was becoming more and more strange. I tried to calm down, but the feeling wouldn't go away. The night was advancing, and I was about to fall asleep when I heard something again. It wasn't exactly a knock, but a scratching sound on the door. My whole body tensed. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming, but I couldn't ignore it. My husband heard it too, and this time he didn't make a joke. He got up again, faster than the first time, and went to the door cautiously. I stood there, frozen, unable to move, waiting for some sign. He opened the door slowly, and once again there was nothing there. No sign of life. No explanation. The wind was stronger, and the snow outside seemed denser, but the strange scratching still lingered in my mind. I asked him if he didn't think that was strange, but he insisted it could be some animal, maybe a tree swaying and scraping the wood. A logical explanation, but one that didn't convince me. There was no tree there that could have caused that, and the sound was too precise, as if something or someone was trying to get in. We decided to try to sleep, even with that knot in our throats. The tension in the air was unbearable, but exhaustion eventually took over. We curled up under the blankets, trying to ignore what had happened, trying to go back to being a honeymoon couple, just the two of us, away from everything. But in the middle of the night, the silence was broken by a noise. Not just any noise, but a loud sound, like something heavy had fallen to the ground. My body woke instantly, and my husband did too, but unlike before, he wasn't calm anymore. I knew he was just as scared as I was. The sound came from inside the house, not outside. We both got up quickly, fear spreading across our skin. We went to the kitchen, not knowing what to expect. And that's where we found it. The stone was on the floor, right in the middle of the kitchen, with broken glass scattered around. The window glass was shattered, and the stone seemed to have been thrown from the outside in. There was no way it could have fallen by accident, not with such precision. We looked at each other, speechless, the terror now consuming us. How could someone or something have thrown a stone inside the house? And if it was a person, who were they? What did they want from us? Why do this? What was worse, the fact that there was someone outside, or the fear of not knowing what was real, and what was just our imagination? The atmosphere grew even denser, and what was supposed to be a peaceful honeymoon night now felt like a trap. I didn't know what to do, but one thing was clear. It wasn't safe to stay there any longer. Fear and a sense of danger had already taken over both of us. The sense of terror intensified with each passing second. I kept staring at the stone on the floor, the broken glass, trying to find a logical explanation. But nothing made sense. Even with the fear growing inside me, I knew we needed to leave, but I no longer had the trust in myself to make a rational decision. We both knew we couldn't spend another night in that cabin. Whatever had caused this, it wasn't going to stop there. I tried to grab the car keys and start the engine, but my hands were trembling so much that I could barely hold anything. Meanwhile, my husband was there, looking out the window, trying to spot any movement, but everything outside was silent. There was no sign of anyone, or at least that's what he wanted to believe. With my heart racing, we decided to leave immediately, no matter what had happened or what was waiting for us. The only thing that mattered was getting away from there. But when we left the cabin and started down the road, the car lights reflected something strange in the darkness. The figure appeared again. There he was in the middle of the road, standing, staring directly at our car. Only this time he was closer. I couldn't see details, but I could feel his presence right there, something tangible. Fear took over me, and the first thing I did was accelerate. I looked back one last time and saw that he was still there, motionless, as if waiting for us to leave, but there was no turning back. The road seemed endless, but the farther we went, the more the feeling that he was following us seemed to intensify. We fled, not knowing exactly what we were running from. There was no explanation for what was happening. And to this day, I don't know if it was a real man or if something supernatural was there. All I can say is that we never returned to that cabin, and we never tried to understand what happened. That feeling of being watched, of having something we didn't understand lurking, never left me. I was left with the sense that, no matter how much we tried to escape, the cabin, the man, and that night in some way kept following us, with no explanation for any of it.